Derailments, the bane of every railway modeller's life. Here's how we're looking at trying to fix it on McKinley. Welcome to McKinley. We, like everybody, are suffering problems with occasional derailments of wagons. Our problems get exacerbated because we've got an awful lot of mainline running track and two additional factors. There's an intensity of operation on McKinley where trains are running around under automated control, and over 50% of our track is in hidden sections, so it's not visible. So a human operator isn't driving that train. It'd be quite hard for humans to do that because it's hidden. And so we are driven to find a way to re-rail derailed trains as they're going around these hidden sections to reduce the headaches. Obviously, we'll try and fix what's causing those problems, but as we all know, in Thomas the Tank Engine parlance, naughty trucks have a mind of their own, and that's what we've been working on. If you have a look at the McKinleyRailway.com website, the layout page, it shows in sort of tube sort of a London Underground style format, the visible and hidden sections. You can move a slider left and right, and it shows in greyed out form with tunnel entrances the hidden sections of the railway. And you also will have seen maybe some of the videos before that show us running around the main lines. So we've been looking at what we could use with re-railers. We looked at all the different manufacturers of them, and we ended up choosing as a base to work on the Atlas rerailer, and here it is in its sort of pure form and its standard form. It suffers from some really interesting limitations for re-railing. The first thing is there's a really sharp burr here, and if you're using, and given it's American, and given American modelers use KD wagons, it's a surprise, because if your wagon's derailed and that coupling hook catches that, it really will exacerbate the problem before the wheel gets a chance to get lifted up back onto the track. The other problem, which is not entirely visible, is that outside of the track there's this groove that runs all the way along. So if the flange of the wheel gets caught in that going along here, it's never going to get a chance to go back on the rails. So there we go with our R&D thinking hats on. And what we're going to show you today is what we've been working on. Basically, we modify the Atlas re-railer by putting these, we initially put these 2.5mm styrofoam strips on the outside to act as buffers, almost like at the bowling alley when you take your children there, those things that stop the ball going off the edge so that your child at least gets one pin down. The problem that we found with using these 2.5mm buffers is they work fine for lots of big things, but there's plenty of rolling stock that has sort of equipment that's so close to the track that you end up having to file. So this wagon, this 21-ton wagon here, it has these two running bars running along the base, and that's a real challenge because we have to then file the surface of this down in order to make it work. But it still does to a great effect. So we're going to show you how we get this area, how these styrofoam buffers work and how we put them on, and we can also show to what effect they happen, that they're useful. We found that they're really good with wagons like this, and also with Bodie wagons like this one here. This one will get re-railed whether the leading wheel or the trailing wheel of a bogie is off the track. We've had an interesting journey with the front pony trucks of steam engines, especially the 260s, the 280s and the 210 locomotives. This front bogie here, the pony truck, if it's off, it proves to be a devil to get back on. And no matter what kind of R&D work we've done with these buffers, it didn't work. But we've got a cunning solution to show you in the second part of this video. So here I've got an example, one of the trusty Bachmann WDs. They're probably one of the first locomotives that came out that were really solid, dependable, and could pull trains around McKinley day in, day out. But even after we pour all this lavish attention on this engine, such as a beautiful weathering coat from Ivana, the sound profiling it and doing all the other stuff with chips, the thing still stubbornly will misbehave on the railway at odd locations and typically it'll be the front ponies. We've got here the Atlas rerailer. It doesn't make a difference if it's a Hornby one. You can see a couple of inherent faults with it. The first is that there is a groove on the outside edges of this, so if the flange is already outside the rails, it's never going to come home. And the other thing is that there's nothing to really, the sort of buffer bar, if you imagine those things in a 10-pin bowling alley, there's nothing to get the wheels back into the centre. Here we've got the engine with the front pony truck off. If I gently push it through here, it'll get to the other end and the front pony stays off. If I pull it, it'll clip back in, you heard it. So that's what we had to solve. And that's what Pete has been doing and spending ages making all these improved versions of the Atlas rerailers, which have worked really well for us. And Pete's going to show you how we did it.
Right, so the first thing I do is I move the lumpy bits at each end so that the coupling on the train doesn't catch it as it goes across. So now we've finished with both ends. The next thing to do is to get a bit of this plastic wadding, and you then cut it to length to go either side. You do 2 of those. And then you put. So the idea is it stops the train. When the train goes across, it just stops anything from falling down in that groove. So once you've done that, you get your liquid cement and just put it along, all the way along, and then do the other side. Just make sure that that's in there like that, and then once you've done that, the next thing to do is to get your rectangular shaped piece of plastic, and you then cut that to size. Then do the same on another, make 2 of these. And you line it up so that it's just almost in line with the piece of white wad that you've already put inside there as a guideline. And then you just make sure that you line it up. You repeat the same thing on this side. The next thing you do is you put plenty of glue underneath it, and then you will swing that over and it drops down one side of the sleeper. Does take a few seconds to dry though. And then repeat this end. Down there. It sort of clicks into place and it goes down alongside the sleeper just at that end. So what you need to do next is to hold that in place, is use any old sort of crocodile clip and just put it on there like that, and then while that one's doing that, do the same again at the other end, and just put a little bit more glue on there. Then turn around, do the other side. And it clicks into place. Another crocodile clip. Repeat it at the other side. We'll leave it like this to when the glue is dry. Right, so once everything is nice and dry, you take off the crocodile clips, and then you're ready to then file it down to the height for the locos and wagons to go across. Use a piece of aluminium or metal strip or whatever, 0.9 of a millimeter, and then once you've done that, the next thing to do is to get a file, and then you basically file it, and you literally keep filing till you get down to the height of the piece of metal. Right, hopefully you can now see that the top edges of the plastic are now flat. The purpose of this is so that different wagons and trains can go across without catching the top of the plastic. And a good way of testing is the pannier tank with the plastic skirt that's down the side where the wheels are. And by just simply doing that, push it across and see if it clears as it goes across. From start to finish, this normally only takes about half an hour.
So everything works really well, except the buffers do not get the front ponies on 260, 280s and 210s on the track. We've tried all kinds of clever modifications, additional bits of styrofoam just sort of glued on to various parts. And then Pete came up with a cunning idea that he'd seen. He doesn't know where it was, but he believes it was on a German model. Those Germans are clever boys, aren't they? And let me show you the detail of what we've done. Here you can see this wheel is now got a tiny piece of sprung wire going up and down, and it's basically being screwed down into the pony nut or the pony screw here, and glued or even slotted into the bogie, and it springs. It holds that pony truck roughly in the center line. We've tried running these things through double slips and points, and it doesn't cause derailments as such. So, and when it hits our buffers, it's got enough force to want to put it back on that it helps. And so we think we've got this problem cracked. The only challenge for us, of course, is we've got 60 of these locomotives to work on. So that's in the long-term projects file, I think. Let's go and see how Pete makes one of these up.
Right, here we've got a 9F Batman loco, and we're going to remove the ponytail. Okay, so we start off by moving this screw. We don't need this little brass copper spring. And then the next thing you do is just give that a little clean, just to clean up. And then once that's done, you then need from Wizard models 0.3 spring wire. So now once you've got that, just cut a little length, and then once you've got your bit of wire, you use a pair of round nose pliers, and then you just make a little loop. Then once you've done that, you get the screw that you've taken out at the beginning, and then normally I just use the screwdriver to just set it off in. Then once you've done that, You then get your front wheel there on top, line it up, and then what you have to do is not over tighten it, but you need to just sort of flick the wire that it's got a little bit of tension in it, that it springs backwards and forwards. So the next thing we need to do is just to make sure that the wire is springy both ways, and then we get the pony truck, and then what you do is you get a razor saw and you find roughly the middle, and then you make a little groove, but just a small little groove, not too much, just enough for the wire to drop in there. If you do it too much, then once you've done that, you just test it that the wire drops, so the wire basically just sits in the groove. So the next thing we do is we get some super glue and super glue the wire in place. Just a little thing like that. Then we just do that, and then a little bit, use a little bit of activator so it speeds up things, that you haven't got to wait ages for it to dry. So once it's dry, you then get a pair of cutters and just cut near where you've glued it. Right, quick test just to make sure it's springy, which it is. When you do that, it goes back to the middle. Right, so we just need to test it. So I'm going to just do that. Now I'm just going to check it. It seems to be working fine. And there you go.
Pete's wonderful 9F. Do you reckon it's going to work, Pete?
Yeah, of course it will.
I love that confidence. So I'm going to derail that engine. We're going to take it through the jiggy and then onto the re-railer. Let's keep out of the noise and start her up to 35. Pete? So as it comes forward, it's going to trip the air dot, which will provoke the jiggy into thing. And what's very interesting, stop her there, Pete, is that the spring inside that front pony, when it bumps off against the shaking pads, actually provokes it to recenter itself on the tracks. That's a bonus. So now we're moving it back, and we're going to just try it going across the re-railer. The wheels are off. Can you take it forward at, say, 25, Pete? Click. That's a result. Well thought out, Pete. That's an impressive answer. Only trouble is, there's only another 56 engines to do.
I'm sorry.
While we're here, let me just tell you through some of the eclectic components we've got on this layout. I'm holding this Fleischmann turntable and the bridge of a newer turntable. They changed the architecture around. If anybody's interested in what we do to adapt a modern Fleischmann turntable into a DCC ready one that doesn't have the cutouts being operational and doesn't feed the points, if you'd like us to do a video, drop us a comment on that. That might be useful just to know whether anyone's interested. On these things here, these little wagons, when we have the couplings fail on a train when it's going round the railway, we can have sometimes out of nowhere, the NEM pockets start to droop, or we can have the butterflies start to fail, and that causes droop as well. But whatever, we're using these 3D printed NEM, these 3D printed KD lookalikes that are super deep in their depth. So they're like double KD depth. And what it is where the train is failing, if it's pulling apart, we put this bright yellow wagon in the break point to connect them back up together again, which has got an awful lot more tolerance than the standard KD, and take the train on to its destination. at which point the operators there will see this, they'll identify it as being that something's wrong either side of it, work out which stop set has the problem, mark it up and put it in as failed. So these are part of our recovery things. We also use these Atlas locomotives. We've got 2 of them as our sort of as our runaways, our Thunderbird engines. We're using American locomotives because they're clearly not British, so people won't think it's a lost loco or it's a train that's detached. They're quite different. So the operation team have 2 of these to run around the layout to go and find lost wagons or something that's come uncoupled from its train somewhere on the line. And then we also have our 2 cleaner trains, which are driven again by Atlas locomotives, and I always forget the names. What are these ones, Ian?
RS1.
RS1s, and these are
S2.
S2s. And they're really dependable, these models. They rarely need attention, and they're going around, especially pushing the cleaner train. It's filthy. They work. But there we go, just a quick aside. Thanks for watching.